I don't know how to introduce because most of the people know him already. He's one of the Laravel core team member. And so far, I know he's one of the most coolest, one of the most smartest guy, Joe Dixon, who is the captain of England cricket team for Laracon India. Please welcome Joe on stage. Boom!
Good afternoon, India. Can everybody hear me? Are you all suitably full after lunch? All right, try not to fall asleep. Okay. So just want to kick things off this afternoon, as we always do at Laravel. No matter the time of the day, we're just going to kick off and say good morning. And no doubt, yes, James, Gus, and Jess are all going to have my back and say good morning back. But now's not really the time, guys, because I'm up on stage trying to give a talk. So let's move things on. So I am Joe. That's me over there on the side, in case you didn't realize. I'm one of the Laravel core team members, where I predominantly work on Vapor, Laravel's serverless deployment platform. I live with my wife and 2 kids in a small city in the UK called Norwich, where we're lucky enough to have 2 cathedrals, 1 castle, but maybe most importantly, the best football team in the world. Which is great for me because when I'm away from the keyboard, I really, really enjoy watching football, all kinds of sport, almost as much as I love Formula 1, almost as much as I love to drink coffee. And that's really all there is you need to know about me at this stage. So let's not waste any more time, and let's start by addressing the elephant in the room. Now, I'm sure you're all probably sat there thinking, but Joe, I came away to Laracon for a couple of days to hang out with my friends, meet some new friends. I tried to get away from Slack. Why have you brought me back here? Well, firstly, just be grateful I didn't bring you into Teams. Secondly, there's a really, really important reason for why we're in Slack today. Now, the title of my talk today is Real-Time Laravel. And the purpose of the talk is to discuss how we can leverage Laravel and the tools in the surrounding ecosystem to build really, really engaging real-time user interfaces. So today I haven't brought my slide deck in PowerPoint. I haven't brought my slide deck in Keynote. My whole slide deck is built on the tool stack. Now, for those of you who may have been living under a rock and don't know what the tool stack is, it's Laravel, Livewire, Alpine.js, and Tailwind CSS. So for the next, 28 minutes or so, we're going to use this slide deck as the base from which to work from. We're going to talk about a little bit of theory about the types of technology we might want to use to build real-time user interfaces or real-time applications. And then we're going to go into a demo where we're actually going to build out on this kind of base that I've built to work from. We're going to actually implement some real-time features of Slack. And to do that, there's a number of different technologies that we could choose. You're probably familiar with using things like short polling, where we periodically poll the server for changes. And there's many different approaches we could take. But today I want to talk specifically about Websockets. And so we're going to head over to the Websockets channel. And we're going to ask the team, what are Websockets? Don't type on stage. Oh, good. And we've got OpenAI, because who's better to answer this question for us than OpenAI? So WebSockets provide a full duplex communication channel over a single long-lived connection between a client, usually a web browser, and a server. This allows for real-time communication where both the client and the server can send messages independently at any time. WebSockets offer a more efficient and responsive alternative to traditional polling techniques. Now, that's actually a really, really nice definition, but it's quite a lot to digest in one go. So let's take a deeper dive. And to do that, I would like to take you back to the short polling example I gave earlier, just to kind of lay the foundations of where we're going to head. So with short polling, we have a client and a server. And the client will make a request to the server to query whether there's any more information available, which it can use to then update its UI. And then we wait for an indeterminate amount of time before kicking off that process again and again and again. And depending on how long that wait time is in the middle, we can sort of begin to simulate real time. We're not actually getting real-time communication, but we can kind of simulate it if we make that polling time short enough. Now, if you need a good analogy of a different way to think about short polling, then imagine you're about to kick off a long 10-hour journey in the car with your kids in the back. And not more than 10 minutes into that 10-hour journey, you start to hear rumblings from the back of, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? On repeat for the next 9 hours and 50 minutes. I think we can do better. And that's where WebSockets come in. So the first thing you might notice in the WebSockets example is that actually there's quite a lot of similarities. We still have a client, and we still have a server. And that client is still making a request to the server. We're still going through an HTTP handshake. It's a slightly different handshake, but we'll come on to talk about that in a bit more detail in a minute. But the same theory applies. The difference is when that handshake is complete, we have an open tunnel, a pipe between the client and the server for which data can freely be sent. The client can send data to the server as and when it needs to, and the server is free to push data back to the client as and when it's available. And so if we extend that analogy of the kids in the back of the car, you can maybe think that the kids are now a little bit more grown up, and they know that we're going to give them the information about how long that journey is going to take and any updates that we have along the way. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at what the WebSocket request looks like. It starts life as a standard HTTP GET request. We have headers that we're all used to, things like the host name. We can send cookies. Pretty much anything goes. But there's a couple of extra special headers which we may not be so familiar with. The first one you can see here is the upgrade header, where we're telling the server we want to upgrade this connection to a WebSocket connection. And that header goes hand in hand with the connection upgrade header. And then we have some things which are specific to WebSockets themselves. We're going to send a key from the client, which the server is going to use in the verification process during the handshake. And we can send additional bits of information, such as which versions of the WebSocket protocol we're able to handle, and whether we want to enable or disable any sub-protocols of the WebSocket. So when the server receives that information, it's going to act on it. It's going to do things like determine whether it's able to even handle the WebSocket protocol version that the client has asked for. It's going to, similar with any sub-protocols, if it's not able to handle them, it's going to let the client know that it can't actually handle that WebSocket request. And then you can see here that we're also sending a WebSocket accept header back. So this is a hashed value that we send back to the client, which verifies to the client, and the client will actually, it uses the key that the client sent in the first place. It generates that value, it sends it back in the response, and then the client can verify that that request is correct. And assuming all of those things work out, we get our open WebSocket connection. And the real upshot of that is twofold. We get reduced latency and increased efficiency. We get reduced latency because we're not having to wait in between requests to see if any new data is available. We get that as and when we need it. And we get increased efficiency because we're no longer having to make those expensive HTTP requests to poll the server for new information. So did anybody about 2 weeks ago see Taylor's announcement tweet for Laravel 11 and Reverb? Hands up? All right, pretty good number. You could probably guess that now I'm going to be talking about Reverb for the remainder of the talk. It's a package that we shipped for Laravel 2 weeks ago, and it's something that I've been working on over the last several months. And I'm excited to show you today the kinds of things that we can do with it. So if you're interested and you want to find out more, head over to reverb.laravel.com. So what is Reverb? Well, you may have guessed it from the opening 10 minutes of my talk that we're going to be dealing with WebSockets. So Reverb is a WebSocket server which we can install and run alongside our existing Laravel applications. It's literally an artisan command away. PHP artisan Reverb start, and we've got a fully functional, standards-compliant WebSocket server running in our application. And we really, really sweat the small stuff to make sure that this thing scales. Now, Everybody's mileage from a WebSocket server is going to vary depending on the number of connections it needs to handle and the number of messages that are being sent to and from those connections. So we did a lot of work, a lot of stress testing to figure out different kind of workloads, which simulated different workloads across Reverb to iron out any bottlenecks and memory leaks. And we're pretty confident that you can handle a lot of traffic on a single server instance. But more than that, we wanted to handle horizontal scaling out of the box. So you can actually spin up a fleet of Reverb servers, sit them running behind a load balancer, distribute your traffic between those load balancers, and Reverb will orchestrate those connections under the hood for you. And it's multi-tenanted out the box. So I mentioned that you can install Reverb into your existing application and have a Reverb socket server running alongside your application. But actually what you might want to do is create a completely separate service specifically for your WebSockets. You might want to install a brand new Laravel application and install Reverb, have that running on its own server, and connect your individual applications to it. Now Reverb will handle that for you out of the box. And it's actually what we're doing with it at Laravel. So with Forge and with Envoy, we have WebSocket connectivity running from a single server instance. And it's Pusher Channels Protocol compliant. So broadcasting has been in Laravel for a very long time now. And if you're not aware, it works on the concept of channels. So users on the front end of your application can connect to channels. And the back end of your application is able to push messages out to those connected clients. And that all works on the Pusher Channels protocol. So if you're currently using any other WebSocket service provider with your Laravel application, you can install Reverb and switch those out with just a few minor configuration changes, and everything will just continue to work. And if data privacy is of concern to you, then we've got that covered as well, because you're not now having to worry about sending your potentially sensitive information over to a third party. You're now handling all of that yourself, and so it never needs to leave your infrastructure. So that's kind of a small whistle-stop tour of the kind of headline features of Reverb. I want to talk a little bit now about how to install it. So we actually announced Reverb at Laracon EU last month, and at the time, the installation process was, let's say, more cumbersome than I would have liked. So we spent some time after the event really polishing this install procedure. And in the Laravel 11 application now, it's really just a two-step process. You just need to run PHP Artisan install broadcasting, and that will go ahead and enable broadcasting within your Laravel application. It will do things like activate Echo, Laravel's front-end broadcasting companion, which we'll talk about and show a little bit in a minute. It will ask you if you want to install Reverb, and then it will go through the Reverb installation process, doing things like publishing your configuration, creating the required environment variables. And so all you need to do after you've run that command is start your server with PHP Artisan Reverb start, and everything is good to go. All right. Should we jump into a demo? So I have this new channel. This is completely dumb. It can't do anything at the moment. It's wired up to Livewire, so I can type a message in here, and I can send it. And Livewire will go ahead and persist that in the database for us. So if I go ahead and refresh the page, we can see that message now appears. But nothing is happening in real time. So we're going to make that happen. We're also going to wire up another couple of things which are really, really important in a real-time chat application like Slack. We're going to wire up a typing indicator, something that you're typically used to seeing under the text input here to let you know whether anybody else is typing at the same time as you. And we're going to wire up presence indication. So you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen that I've got all of the Laravel team members who are here today at Laracon India listed. But none of them are online. And we know at least that I'm online, so I should be showing green. And in actual fact, I have another browser here. Can everybody see that okay? Do you want that bumped up a bit? It's good? Okay. I'll bump it. So I'm actually logged in on the left-hand side as Jess, and I'm logged in on the right-hand side as James. And what we're going to do is wire this up so that Jess and James are going to communicate with each other and give us a bit more interactivity. So let's look into some code. OK. So I mentioned the install PHP Artisan install broadcasting command that now ships in Laravel 11 applications. I just want to spend a couple of minutes telling you exactly what's happening when you run that command. So the first thing it's going to do is enable the channels routing within your application configuration. It's this line here, line 11. And it points the application at the channels.php roots file. So let's go and have a look in there, in here. And you can see here that we've got a couple of channels defined, which we're going to come on to in a bit more detail in a minute. But this is where you tell Laravel which channels an authenticated user should have access to. And we'll go into a bit more detail on that in a minute. I also mentioned that, oops, wrong file, that it activates Echo, so Laravel's front-end companion under the hood. So now in Laravel 11, we publish this new echo.js file, which comes pre-configured, ready to use with Reverb, has all of the environment variables pre-configured, and it's just ready to go. And in our environment file, you can see that we also publish these Reverb-specific environment variables. So that all happens under the hood, the upshot of that all being that Reverb is ready to go. I actually already have it running, so let's just have a look at what's happening in here. So I'm running Reverb here with the debug output enabled. So with debug output enabled, we can kind of scroll through here and see all of the messages which are being sent back and forth across the WebSocket. Now, at the moment, they're mostly ping messages. So with the WebSocket protocol, we're able to send ping messages between the client and the server so that both can be comfortable that that connection is still alive. And that's what's happening behind the scenes here. OK, so I'm going to close that down. And we're going to jump into the business end of this demonstration. So we have one single component here. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'm using Livewire for the purposes of this talk. What I didn't mention is that I'm actually using Vault. Now, if any of you were here at Laracon India last year, you may remember that Vault was a package that Taylor announced on stage at Laracon India last year. And more recently, I've been playing with it a little bit more and actually find it a really, really nice developer experience. So I'd recommend checking it out to see if you like it too. But it actually serves another purpose. It's really nice in an environment like this to be able to see everything happening in a single file. So I've got all of my PHP logic in here, I've got all of my HTML in here, and I've got all of my JavaScript in here, and we can see it all without flicking between files. So to start, let's just have a quick, get some familiarity with what's happening in this component. We have some state. So we have the channel that we're currently in, which is being passed to us via root model binding. And then on our mount method, we're going to populate the messages that are available in this channel by pulling them directly from the channel model. And the only other thing we have here is a send method. And the send method accepts a message, and all it does is passes the authenticated user and the message through to the send method on our channel model. We'll come and have a look at what's happening in there shortly. Then we jump into some HTML, and it's pretty straightforward stuff. The only really exciting parts in here are where we are iterating over the messages. And here you can see, because we're using Livewire, we immediately have access to Alpine.js, and Alpine.js is kind of enhanced with some features specific to Livewire. So we can actually access the messages which have been populated into our Livewire component directly from Alpine.js from the $wire object. So here we're just going to iterate over the messages and print them out on the screen. And then a little bit further down the way, we have our editor. Now, our editor is a completely separate component. I'm not going to go into the details of that. It's not particularly exciting. But it does fire two events that we're interested in. It's going to fire in a submitted event. And when that submitted event is fired, we're going to call our send method on our Alpine component. And we're going to pass through the message that's sent through to us from the editor. We're also going to be listening for the typing event, and when the typing event is fired, we're going to call our own internal typing method on the Alpine component. So then we jump down into our Alpine, and we have some context here for the Alpine component. We get an understanding of whether the current user is typing or not. We can see we have an array of other users who may be typing at any given time. We have a reference to the current channel that we're connected to. And then the exciting stuff happens. So we have this listen for events method, and this is where we're going to start hooking into Reverb and WebSockets. So the first thing I want to do is uncomment this line. So this line, we're going to set the channel in state. And to do that, we're going to call the echo.private method, and we're going to pass through the channel name that we want to connect to. Private here is important because I mentioned earlier we don't want people to be able to connect to channels that they shouldn't have access to. So let's go and have a look at what's happening in the browser when I do this. And I'm going to open DevTools, Network tab. I'm going to refresh the page, and I'm going to bump this up a little bit. Real estate is at a premium. So in the response method here, the response tab here, you can see that we've made a call to the pusher subscribe event. Because we're leveraging pusher channels under the hood, everything is kind of pusher namespaced. And you can see that we're passing through this authentication token. But where's that authentication token come from? Has it just appeared miraculously out of thin air? Well, no. How can I? Let's get rid of this and open this. OK. So you can see here that we're actually also making a call to, sorry, let me make this a little bigger. We're actually making a call to an endpoint within our application. We're making a call to the broadcasting/auth endpoint. And that's an endpoint that Laravel exposes to us. And it ties in directly with the, channels.php roots file that I mentioned earlier. So we pass the channel which we want to connect to. And then our channel definition will receive the currently authenticated user. And we're going to receive the string of the channel name that we want to connect to. We're then going to pull that channel out of the database or attempt to find that channel. And if we find it, we're just going to make sure that the subscribers to that channel contains the currently authenticated user. So here we're just going to return a Boolean value. And that's going to tell Laravel that, yes, this user should be able to access that channel, give them an authentication token in which they can use. And so that's where the authentication token comes from. And Echo, Laravel's front-end companion for broadcasting, handles all of that for us. It just knows the endpoint that we need to connect to. It's going to go ahead and make that request for an authentication token, and if it gets one, it's going to use it to then connect to the socket server. And the socket server then sends across that authentication token with its payload, and assuming it also does a verification to make sure it's a valid token, and assuming it is, we get a connection which we can see that we have here. And we can see now those ping and pong messages being sent across the WebSocket. So we have that wired up, but we still don't have anything real-time happening. We're just connected to the channel. So let's have a look at how we might do that. And I'm going to jump into our livewire component here. And you can see that we have this listen method, which we can call on the channel that we're now connected to. So we're going to listen for the message sent event, and then we're simply going to take the message that we receive and append it to our messages array on our livewire object. But where's that message sent event coming from? It's not just going to appear for us. We need to actually trigger that event. So if you remember at the top of the file, I mentioned we have this send method, and it calls the send method on the channel model. So let's go and have a look at what's happening in there. OK. So all we're doing is checking that we've actually received a message and bailing if we don't. If we do, we're going to go ahead and store that message in the database for the given channel and for the given user. And then we're going to fire off a message sent event. OK, it's interesting. It's got the same name as what we're expecting in the front-end code. So let's click through and have a look at what's happening in here. All right, so we can see that we're implementing this should broadcast interface. Now what that's going to do is tell Laravel that anytime this event is fired, I want you to broadcast that over our given WebSocket connection. And we have a public property on here for message. So Laravel's going to go ahead and make any public, it's going to send any public property across as part of the payload of our message, which we're going to broadcast to our connected users. And finally, we're going to tell Laravel which channels we would like to broadcast this on. Now, this can be multiple channels, but in the case of our demonstration here, we're just going to broadcast to one private channel. And again, that's channels.channelName. So we can see that everything is now wired up. Echo's going to automatically, let's scroll back down. Echo's going to automatically listen for that message being broadcast and append that to our messages array. And then all being well, Alpine's going to re-render the component and show us our new message. So let's take a look and see if that's happening. Let's make this a little smaller. And Jess is going to say, hey. And you can see on the right-hand side that James has now received that message in real time. And if James says back, sup, Jess is going to receive that in real time. And if we have a quick look at the WebSocket request again, you can see that we're seeing these messages being sent back and forth across our back across our WebSocket server without having to make additional HTTP requests. All right. So that's real-time messaging wired up. Let's have a look at typing indicators. Let's jump back into our Reverb component, and we're going to ignore that section for a while. We're going to come into this typing section. Now, hopefully you can remember that when I went through the component in the outset, our editor is going to fire off a typing event, which is going to in turn call the typing method on our Alpine component here. So let's have a look at what's happening. Well, the first thing we're going to do is debounce the input. We don't want to fire off this start typing request on every keystroke because that's sending unnecessary traffic through our WebSocket. We want to listen for the first keystroke and not do anything else for 2 seconds. And then at the end of that 2 seconds, if the user has stopped typing, we're going to fire off the stop typing event. And you may have noticed here that we're using a new method on our channel called Whisper. Now, Whispers are really, really interesting because they don't actually interact with our Laravel application at all. This is all happening on the front end and our WebSocket server. A Whisper is going to send that event directly to, in our case, directly to Reverb. And Reverb's going to understand, OK, I need to forward this message on to all of the other users connected to this channel. And so we have that event firing. And we can probably see that now in the UI. If I jump back into here and James starts typing, you can see that we've got our start typing event appearing and our stop typing event appearing. But nothing is happening yet in the UI. And that's because we actually need to listen for those events. So we've got the user who's typing sending the events, but the clients who are listening are not able to receive them yet. And that's happening here. So here we want to listen for whispers. So we're going to listen for the start typing, and we're going to listen for the stop typing event. And all that we're going to do when that happens is we're either going to add a user to the user's typing array or remove it from the user's typing array. And then I have some logic which is just going to render those users on the front end. So all being well now, if you keep an eye up on Jess's UI here, and James starts typing, we get that appearing in the UI. I'm sorry, this is really small. And then I lose everything. Let's close this for a sec. OK, so let's continue. OK, hopefully you can see now. We get James's typing. And after 2 seconds, it's going to stop. And if Jess starts typing, James receives that. And after 2 seconds, it's going to stop. All right. So just one more thing I want to show you. And that is how we could deal with something like presence indicators. And again, it's quite simple. But we're actually going to move into a different Alpine component this time. So if you can imagine for the purposes of the UI, on the right hand, the white section here is all dealt with by a channel. And the section wrapping it is the workspace as a whole. So we want to actually jump out of our channel and into the workspace. And within the workspace, I have a component called users. And it's a simple component. It's just an Alpine component, which is going to iterate over a list of users. And the only thing that's exciting that's happening in here is, we are dynamically setting the class name dependent on the user's online status. So when they're online, we're going to make it green. And when they're offline, we're going to make it gray. So then we jump into Alpine, and all that we're doing in Alpine is taking users from our LiveWire component, and we're going to use the JS directive to make that play nicely with Alpine, and we're going to set that as a property on our component. And then we're going to use echo again. But this time we're going to see some new methods again. So we're going to see the join method. Now the join method is specific to something called a presence channel. And a presence channel is nothing complicated. There's nothing to be worried about. It's literally just an extension of a private channel. So we still have to authenticate to be able to access that channel. But we get access to a few different lifecycle hooks, which we don't get when we're dealing specifically with a private channel. So when we first join the channel, we're going to invoke this here method. And the here method is going to tell us who is currently connected to the channel when we join. So the users who are already online, the ones who've got to work early and they're online before you, we're going to receive those ones first in the UI. And then we have another couple of lifecycle events. We have the joining method. So anytime a new user joins a channel, we receive access to that user. And similarly, when a user leaves a channel, we get access to that user too. So all we're doing here in this markOnline method, which is a little bit further down the page, is attempting to find the user in our list of users on the component and changing their online status to true. And if I jump back into the UI now and open up these, you should now see that James and Jess are online in these two browsers, and I'm still online connected in the other browser. And just to prove that that's working, I'm going to copy this, close the original tab, and if you keep an eye on James's window, you should see that Jess goes offline. And if I reopen, maybe the Wi-Fi's dead. I didn't think I needed Wi-Fi. Live demos. All right, you might have to, oh, we're business. I have no idea what happened there. But you see now, Jess is back online. So you can see here that with the tools that are now available to us within Laravel and the surrounding ecosystem, we can build up these really, really engaging, interactive, snappy, and real-time user interfaces with actually not too much effort. That's what I wanted to show you today. So I'm going to just jump back into the general channel to wrap things up. And I'm going to say, I'm back. And when we're back from lunch, everybody welcomes us back. So I just wanted to show you that there. OK. So I've shown you how that works. But there's one more thing. It's actually two more things, but it's more punchy when I say one. So as we often like to do at Laravel, we want to make things as easy as possible. So we went ahead and reworked the whole installation process to make that as seamless and easy as possible from the get-go. We've also done another couple of things. And the first thing that we've done is made this really, really easy to get using within Forge. So if you already have a Laravel application running Forge, Forge will actually be able to detect that you're running Reverb. And there's a toggle switch in the UI, which will go ahead and do everything from creating the Reverb daemon for you. It will change things like the maximum number of file descriptors allowed on the server so that you can handle more connections than you typically are with a default setup. And it's going to make everything really easy for you to get up and running. And of course, we want to be able to monitor our Reverb server out in the wild. So we have a dedicated Pulse integration where you're able to see in real time the number of connections and messages that are flowing through your application. So that's everything that I've got to speak to you about today. But I just wanted to wrap up with three things that we need to take away from this talk today. The first one being, and I might get hated here, but I think we can probably all agree that that Slack is objectively better than Teams for real-time communication. We can probably agree that WebSockets are a better route to go down for real-time communication than listening to our kids screaming at us from the back of the car. And we've learned that with Laravel and the tools available to us in the surrounding ecosystem, we can build these really, really great user interfaces to delight our users. And that's me. If you want to check out more about Reverb, come and speak to me. I'll be around. Or check out the website, reverb.laravel.com. There's a fun little item on there where you can kind of click emojis and see other people in the world clicking them at the same time. All right.
And very big round of applause for the Joe Dixon for making sure it will work fine. Thank you very much. So I think by looking at your shirt, I think something is different. How many of you feel by looking at his shirt, something is different today? How many of you feel something might be different by looking at his shirt? Raise your hand, we'll bring something. Yeah. So is it something special today?
Yeah, it is.
What is it?
It's my wife's birthday today, so she's been very good and let me come out to India while she's at home on her own. So I'm eternally grateful for her to letting me be here today.
So Charlie.
To Charlie.
So in front of Charlie, Joe is like easy peasy lemon squeezy, right?
Sorry?
It was just saying like,
okay.
In front of our wife, we are always like a normal people because she's always right.
Yeah.
So I think for Charlie, why don't we make a call?
Let's do it.
Let's see. We are doing another live demo.
I often get ghosted by my wife, so she may not answer. You coming on? FaceTime videos, I think, yeah. You should pick. It's ringing.
I think it's a surprise for her, right?
Yeah. Well, I told her to be by her phone, but
How about we play birthday song in background?
I don't know, Vishal.
No, you don't know? Let's try one more time.
I'm still ringing.
She didn't pick up the call. We both are sailing on same boat.
We record
no
a video?
Yeah. Yeah, we can record a video.
All right.
All right. So we'll sing a song together, the birthday song, all right? No, not Hindi, bro. Something which she can understand. Otherwise, she has to use Google Translator or maybe another AI tool to understand. She might feel what was it? It might go wrong.
All right.
Day to you. Happy birthday, dear Charlie.
Hey! Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Joe. Please tell her we miss her and we all love her.
Okay,
On
I
behalf
will.
of
I'll
India.
pass that on.